Welcome back to the continuation of the DC Civil War story, a video I uploaded about a week ago, give or take. If you haven't seen that video, the link will be in the description, so feel free to check it out. This video is to discuss, and for me to show you in my version of this story, which characters would take which sides. Before we get into that, I want to clear up a couple of changes to the story that I would personally make. Number one, and the biggest driving force of this story, after uploading that original video, I started to cool off on the idea, and I even saw a lot of comments from people who felt the same way, and it just made sense to change it. Superman's reasoning for joining the registration would not be for the captivity of his particular family at the time. It would be because he genuinely wants to, and I do believe there is a way to write the story in which Superman actually thinks the registration is a good idea and why he would want to join it. That also leads me into this idea of Lex Luthor not necessarily being completely, totally evil. I did describe that in this story of mine, he would have been a huge help in stopping Darkseid. I do think there are stories within my world that would show Luthor being good and bad at different times in his life, and there would also be instances where you could see a friendship form between Superman and Lex Luthor. And I think there is a particular situation within Civil War where even Luthor is creating the Registration Act, not to be evil, but because he also feels like this actually is a good idea. Having Superman join the registration because he believes in it is the world of a difference. And one of the last things I will mention for now is I do want to make it very clear that there is not necessarily a good or a bad side. Just because you are pro-registration, that does not mean you are bad. That does not mean you are on the wrong side. It depends on your outlook. It depends on how you see the situation, and that's how these heroes are going through this story. They're really trying to figure out what is the best side for them personally and what they morally and ethically think is correct. So with that being said, let me give you each side and some specific details for certain characters on why they chose which one. So for now, you can look at it as Team Batman, Team Superman, or Team Lex Luthor, or Rebels and Registration. Now, there would be so many characters who would be involved in this story, but I'm only going to give you 14 per side. These are the characters who would be getting a lot of screen time or page time or dialogue. So for Team Batman or the Rebels, you have, of course, Batman himself, Barbara Gordon as Oracle, Jason Todd as Red Hood, Zatanna, Hawkgirl, Wonder Woman, Raven, Beast Boy, Mr. Terrific, The Question, Martian Manhunter, Green Arrow, John Stewart, Firestorm, and Power Girl. Now, there's actually a couple of caveats for these characters, and I'm going to get into them. Now, at this point in the story, of course, these characters have all been around for about 10 to 15 years, let's say, so there's a lot of history between a lot of these characters. Being members of the Bat family and having gone through so many things with Bruce Wayne and so many other people, I think Barbara and Jason would immediately know what side they're on. Not only is it because it's Bruce Wayne, it's Batman, they know where their allegiances lie, but I also think that they believe registration would be the wrong move to make for people who are trying to constantly save the world. Two people like Oracle and Red Hood whose talents and skills go completely opposite from that of the government, I can't see why they would join the other side. When you look at Zatanna and Raven, these are two people who are going to look at the government and say, I won't do any favors for you. And also this idea that you can't necessarily cap off a magician. You can't control me on how much power I can utilize and how far I can go with it. How is this going to work for trying to put on a registration cap for superheroes or metahumans? And I don't think they would be aligned with it at all. Along with Zatanna is a character who in my world is actually a founding member of the Justice League and has a very close friendship with Batman. Not only is she a founding member of the original JL, she would go off eventually with John Constantine and even Martian Manhunter to create Justice League Dark. This is a woman whose entire career as Zatanna has been around all metahumans and has more or less had the back of Batman at all times. And also, joining Raven on the side of the rebels would of course be Beast Boy. And at this time, there's a very real possibility they would be in a relationship, and even if they wouldn't, I still believe they would grow a very fond connection of one another, and I don't think he would have any interest in joining the registration at all. I feel as if his way of thinking would be, I've done fine without the government thus far, why do I need to join them now? The Question and Green Arrow, these are two guys who would just be hell-bent against registration, Luthor, and Superman. They would want no part of it, especially Green Arrow. He would be so heavy on the F the government hype train. He would do whatever he could to topple Luthor's regime with Superman at his side. Green Arrow would be one of the first, if not the first character to join Batman in this rebellion. The Question, I think he would really be interested, and he would take it upon himself to try and weed his way into the government and to figure out if there is an overarching reason why Lex Luthor has created this registration act or any other incriminating thing against the government he could potentially find, and if there is a way to topple this idea. Once again, there is no right and wrong here, but for a lot of these characters, there's nothing wrong in taking a double look or second guessing Lex Luthor and truly wondering if there is another reason for this. For Hawkgirl and Power Girl, I think they're two characters that around them they would be surrounded by people who are saying we should join the government, and they would both be like, nah, I don't like the sound of that at all. That sounds very fishy and very sketchy to me. Power Girl would be the odd woman out in the Superman family. She would be one of the very few, if not literally the only member of the Superman family to join Batman and the rebellion. Hawkgirl, I think there would be a big divide between her and Hawkman, and as you can probably tell, that means Hawkman's going to be part of the registration. That now causes a divide between their relationship. Now, the characters with certain caveats on this team. Let's start with Firestorm. This is a character who would be part of the rebellion, but over time he would realize that the lead of Batman is not for him, and he simply cannot get along with him to the point where he's actually convinced that the rebellion is not the place to be, and he has to go join Superman and the Registration Act. John Stewart, even though he's the Lantern part of Team Rebels, he would not join this story probably until halfway through, considering he is coming back from Oa, analyzing the situation on Earth, and realizing that Rebels are his particular side that he wants to be on. Mr. Terrific and Martian Manhunter, here are two characters who would join the registration, but eventually leave it to join Batman and the rebellion. Mr. Terrific would leave the registration relatively early, whereas Martian Manhunter would come about halfway through the story. For Mr. Terrific, he would look around this registration act and he would now see how heroes are operating from within it. It's not at his speed. He doesn't agree with how they're being necessarily held down, and he decides to join the opposite side. Martian Manhunter would mainly join for Superman, considering that they have a pretty tight-knit relationship over the years, and they have a lot in common with one another, but as time goes on, he simply can't agree with it anymore, and he switches sides. But that comes a little later, of course. Here comes the really interesting bit of this story. When Wonder Woman finally returns, because yes, she actually leaves at first to return to Themyscira, because when all the chaos is happening, she doesn't actually know what it means for her and her Amazonian people. When the the dust kind of settles and the Registration Act is in full force, she finally decides to come back and realizes that her sense of truth and justice is not necessarily the same as what Luthor and Superman are doing with the Registration Act, so she joins Batman. But this is where I would change things. Batman would only be in charge of the rebellion for a certain amount of time, because over time he would actually get sick of leading this group. He wouldn't have even wanted to lead the group in the first place, and also there would be a lot of people on this team who might not really agree with his leadership tactics. So when Wonder Woman comes back, Batman literally gifts Diana the role of leader part of this team, and even though Batman would still be considered one of the rebels, he would go off and do his own thing. Whereas Wonder Woman and the rest of the rebels have more of a quarrel on the decision making of all heroes and metahumans around the world, Batman's quarrel is much more pertained to just Superman and Lex. This is also where Batman would privately be working with the Question to see if they could figure out what's going on behind closed doors. So at the beginning, when Batman was leading it, the face of the rebellion would have been Batman, with his two right-hand men being Zatanna and Green Arrow. When Wonder Woman comes in and Batman gives her the leadership role, she now becomes the true face of the rebellion. Her right-hand people would remain Zatanna along with Mr. Terrific. Now let's look at Team Superman. Along with Superman comes Captain Marvel, or Shazam, Captain Atom, Nightwing, Starfire, Black Canary, Hal Jordan, Hawkman, Flash, Cyborg, Blue Beetle, Supergirl, Atom, Black Lightning, and Steel. Some of these characters would be joining because, hey, it's Superman, how could we go wrong? But some could be seeing what Superman sees and think, yeah, it is a good idea. We should have had this from the beginning. You even have characters who would be quarreling with other people in their opposite views, like Hawkman, considering Hawkgirl is a rebel. When you look at Supergirl and Steel, I think they are two very loyal members of the Superman family, especially to Superman. They're going to be in the same situation that Red Hood and Oracle was with Batman. They're not going to turn their back on Superman. But coupling them with Black Lightning and Cyborg, I think all four of those characters do also have the same or very similar ideals with Superman, and potentially even the way that this version of Lex Luthor would be thinking in this story. Safety and the value of humanity is their utmost importance, and those characters will feel that same way. I think with Captain Marvel or Shazam, he would be in a situation where his childlike, gullible nature would maybe force him to go down the route of the Registration Act. His favorite hero, the idol he looks up to, is Superman. He wants to be by his side. He wants to show him his worth. You also have Captain Atom, which I think in a lot of ways he is just another Superman, just the way that Green Arrow would have been the first rebel with Batman. Captain Atom was the first to sign the registration along with Superman. Those two together are just the most patriotic faces that the registration could print on posters and plaster all over America and say, this is the side you want to be on. Atom, and we're specifically going with Ryan Choi, being a brilliant scientist, I think he would actually use his expertise for this new government with Lex Luthor. He might believe in this idea that there needs to be some sort of control or limit on metahumans and how they deal with threats to perhaps limit how much death or destruction is caused. The same thing with Jon Stewart. Hal Jordan had to return to Oa to discuss the situation on Earth with the Guardians, and I even had this idea that when they return, the Guardians have actually decided to work in unison with the Registration Act on Earth. Both sides of their leadership, both governments, don't have quarrels with one another. This way, allowing Green Lanterns to still operate as space cops for the Guardians within the legal limit of Earth. That is where Jon Stewart disagrees with a lot of the ideas, but Hal Jordan doesn't, and then they end up splitting ways. For Nightwing and Starfire, I think these are two characters who will stick side by side for as long as they possibly can. The reason I have them with Registration is because usually I would actually say that Nightwing would go to the rebels. But I do have this idea that at this particular part in the story, Batman and Nightwing are not super friendly with one another at the moment. They've possibly had some sort of falling out. And I also think Nightwing would be very close with Superman at this time, and that would be his reason in joining him. Now, I'm not saying Nightwing and Starfire, especially Nightwing, would be Team Registration forever, but I do think a majority of the story would be him with Superman. Now, for the couple of caveats on this team, you do have Blue Beetle and Black Canary. These are two characters who have probably had arguments and opposite opinions to their respective characters. Firestorm being a friend of Blue Beetle and Green Arrow potentially being a boyfriend or husband to Black Canary. Black Canary halfway through the story or maybe a little later would switch sides over to the Rebellion. But here's the interesting thing. As Firestorm leaves the Rebellion and goes to the Registration, Blue Beetle would actually leave the Registration and go over to the Rebellion. So they would be the two characters whose ideas and opinions would completely flip. And then there's also the Flash, which I needed a little bit of an explanation for this. He would start off as Registration. And let's just say this story was 10 volumes, okay? 10 books. I say he would be Registration until volume 3 or 4. Then he would go off to join the Rebellion because he doesn't agree with Registration fully. There's some things he likes, some things he doesn't. And then when he's in the Rebellion, he joins until maybe volume 6. He would leave the Rebellion too. And he would take on like this Spider-Man role from Marvel's Civil War. He would have to be a voice of reason, not just for Wonder Woman and Superman, but also Batman as well. You guys are the Trinity. Stop fighting. Stop arguing with one another. Come together. Find a compromise. Find an agreement. I know you can do this. So Flash would be operating from within both teams and then from outside of both teams as well. And then the faces of this team, who would be front and center? You would have Superman, of course, with his right-hand men being Captain Atom and Cyborg. So more or less as of right now, that is how I would have both teams looking. There would obviously be so many other characters that would come from here. There would even be certain anti-hero, anti-villain, or maybe certain villains who have been given a second chance, who would have to choose, do I become a rebel or do I join the Registration? There are even some super popular characters, some I'm thinking of right now, Aquaman, Swamp Thing, Dr. Fate, and they're not necessarily part of this story because I just think they are characters who could not be bothered with this and would want no part of this in general. I think there are so many other ideas that I could go into. Even the fact that I've kind of changed this story around so that Luthor is not so over the top evil. He could still have some fallback plans where if things are not going his way and if he does need to get things back on track through force, any certain thing that he could do that would end up making Luthor a villain, that's a possibility. If the story was to go down that way as him being a villain. There are so many changes I could make and there are so many details I still don't have filled out. But I'm going to leave this video where it is right now. So depending on what happens after, if you guys want me to continue this, I'm sure I can find a way to do so. So let me know in the comments below what you think of the teams and what maybe your teams would look like if you made a DC Civil War story. So with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.